I tried to get a Tupac lyric for this podcast, and ChatGPT said that it wouldn't give me the lyric. All of a sudden, it was like, no, that's copyrighted material. I'm like, excuse me, who am I speaking to?
What was the Tupac lyric, more interestingly?
I don't know. I didn't get it. Well, it was about changes. It was that, his song Changes. It's like the old way wasn't working, so we got to try a new way. That's what I'm kind of thinking about with this agentic web. I'm like, okay, this sounds terrible, but at the same time, like, have you visited a website recently? Like, why don't we give it a shot? So we're going to get into, I think this was a really important week when it comes to a lot of what we've been talking about for the last year plus. And
who are
it's
you,
really about what?
Who are you?
Who are you?
What?
Brian Morrissey. Maybe
are you Brian Morrissey?
I hate that. I don't think that's necessary.
Not everybody listening to the podcast has heard the podcast before, let alone read who's on this.
Someone told me this week that I went to lunch with. He said that he couldn't keep track of the different people on the podcast. I'm like, one guy sounds Euro.
That's me. I'm Alex Schleifer, human computer.
Anyway, okay. Well, welcome to the show. I'm Brian Morrissey. I'm joined by Troy Young and Alex Schleifer. Do you guys want to identify yourselves for the listeners? Troy, you want to go first?
I'm the one with the sort of slight Canadian accent.
Okay, slight Canadian accent.
And I'm the one with the hard to describe European accent.
Yes. How? By the way, how did the Eurovision party go? There was some controversy around the Eurovision.
It was fantastic. Everybody got really into it. And my favorite part of Eurovision is the scoring, is the moment where they spend an hour and a half just like getting different scores from different countries. It is so tense. And even the kids were just watching a spreadsheet for an hour, jumping around. It was fantastic. And somebody described it as 3-hour halftime show, which is true. That show is incredible, guys. Worth a watch every year. And this year Austria won, and I'm part Austrian, so I'm gonna hopefully record the next year's PVA from Austria, live from Eurovision.
Oh, wonderful.
Live from some pervert's basement in Vienna.
They do have a reputation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversies that always come out of Eurovision. I think it's impossible for them to try to keep this apolitical. Israel's the big controversy because they're in Eurovision. Supposedly because their public broadcaster is part of the public broadcaster group that puts this on. I have no idea.
Just a curiosity, Alex, aside from sort of negative historical framing, what is the sort of cliche difference between a German-Austrian and a German?
I mean, what's the difference between a Canadian and an American? I don't know. I mean, I guess Austrians are seen as...
humor.
Maybe Austrians are seen as more, I don't know, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but like more, rural and affable.
Who's going to call you? The embassy?
The embassy does
Your
call
parents?
me when I say things about Austria, yes.
So I think this was a pretty important week. I want to start off, we'll get to a bunch of different topics, hopefully, if we don't get caught up here. But I think a lot of what we've been talking about for the last year is really happening now. We're seeing change happen all at once. What did they say? Suddenly and then all at once. And the page-based internet is kind of going away, it looks like. And this week we had the developer conferences. Google and Microsoft came out with a bunch of news. And we're seeing AI basically tear down the front door of the internet. And I think that's going to have a major impact, obviously. And I think the shift right now that we're seeing is going from browsing to one where agents interpret our intent, protocols execute our tasks, and pages basically disappear into the back end. And in this kind of protocol era of the web, it can get kind of wonky. We can delve through it, but it has major implications for publishers, advertisers, product designers, pretty much everyone. And some of the quotes just came out from this were really striking to me. Like one was this former executive was quoted from Bloomberg as saying, giving traffic to publisher sites is kind of a necessary evil. The main thing they're trying to do, that's Google, is get people to consume Google services. So there's this natural tendency to want to have people stay on Google pages, but it does diminish the sort of deal between the publishers and Google itself. That's a understatement. And then even Google's head of search said the search results page was a construct. I mean, she's starting to get metaphysical about it. And I think the message that was very clear, we'll go through all the things that they rolled out, and some of the stuff I don't think really matter in the long term, because it's about search really at the end of the day. That's that to me, that's the biggest thing to discuss, not like some deal with Warby Parker for glasses. No offense to Warby Parker or the glasses. Because Google has been the underpinning of the web. Without search, the open web just simply doesn't really exist. And so profound change. Troy, I want you to start off. Google came out with a bunch of stuff at Google I/O. We've got AI mode that is now going to be into the search box, so you can switch into AI mode. They did some other things like these AI Ultra plans and the VO3 to catch up on video, and now it can include voice too, and that's all nice and everything. But to me, the message was really around search. But I'd like to get your take
on the event, Brian, or on what's
the
going
implications, not the event, not like the catering.
I have been struggling to imagine, I don't know, the conceptual form of the next internet and what it means to people that make content and the whole kind of ecosystem around that, including monetization. And the idea that I guess we've seen coming for a while, that there's a new natural language powered AI layer on top of anything that pulls most of the value from a page, is pretty profound, because suddenly you lose, all your surface area as a content creator. And, to build a media business, at least in kind of old fashioned context or construct, you need, audience and a way to get something in front of that audience. So you need a page. And so it just forces you to fundamentally rethink where, how you get attention, how you build something sustainable. And I think that, like what's going to underpin next generation of media companies. Now, there's the obvious observation, which is anything that has focused attention in a timeline, i.e. audio or video, is very well positioned, because it will continue to be a place where you can direct a user's attention at some kind of partner message. I spent a long time making things that trapped audiences and monetize them in the form of, media businesses that were anchored on web pages. So it's pretty profound. I guess you can start to see a world where there's these sort of this new kind of conceptual stack, or you have an agent layer, a protocol layer, and the data. And the agent layer is sort of, I guess, going to be ChatGPT or Copilot or Perplexity or Gemini. And that's, where more and more of your time will be spent, and where more and more of the value will be aggregated. There will be protocols that connect, services and knowledge, and those are emerging now. One's called MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol. There was the thing that Microsoft launched last week at their Build conference called NL Web.
Yeah.
And these are essentially ways of allowing, agents to connect with your data, which are your pages, your content, your functionality, and with each other. So you can imagine, an emergent world where, more of the activity on the web is, robots connecting to robots. And then you have a kind of service and data layer, which is websites and tools and pages and products, and where, the underlying value that's kind of surfaced by the agents. So, in that new construct, sort of everything changes. And, I think obviously there's going to be a new art in how things get surfaced inside of the aggregation layer or the agent layer. There's, I think a necessity. Things by necessity become more transactional, because you can't take that away from someone. So you can aggregate content, and you can have content, sucked up by the AI and recontextualized and all that. But if you have to buy something, you still have to process that SKU. Someone has to ship it to you, whatever. And that includes any service or, any event, all of that. So I think that it makes advertising more transactional. I think that it forces everyone to think about pages not as repositories of content, but as Alex will expound on a little bit, like places for utility or interaction with the consumer. I think that, we're seeing a world even more conceptually, I think, where language, like the interface to everything, can be in natural language, and that includes code. And it also means, I think, kind of strangely, that all languages, like people will continue to communicate in Chinese or French or Italian, but there's no longer an obstacle in communicating to someone in another language, because it can be all translated in real time, and it's just ultimately moving, through a system and becomes code. And so I think that that's pretty wild. And I also think that, on the more, practical side, the browser as a construct itself is kind of up for grabs, because, it's, I think, going to become, browsers and applications become, more important interfaces to everything. And very closely related, I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on and we're seeing this now with the announcement last week or this week of the bizarre marriage of Sam Altman and Jony Ive. People are going to, if they want to own the interface layer, they're going to want to own the hardware. So you're going to see more innovation around hardware, and that's going to come in the form of new kind of phone-like devices, I suspect, and things like glasses like I'm wearing right now. So lots and lots of implications. Web pages become kind of background infrastructure. Value shifts to actions, certainly not impressions. All sites become legible to agents. And I think increasingly advertising just becomes totally dominated by performance if it hasn't done that already. So those are some of my observations.
Okay, Alex, you want to jump in on some of the details here? Because to me, like, again, when search goes from being interaction instead of navigation, that really changes sort of everything. And I think one of my conversations with publishers, that one of the things that comes out of a lot of them is sort of being paralyzed about not even knowing what to build at this point, because we're talking about, web pages just become repositories, I guess, right? Like, and for agents. So you're almost like, we've gone from like writing for algorithms to like now people are going to be creating for agents. And then there's just this unknown grand economic bargain that seems to need to be struck at some point, because there's just simply not going to be the content that is fed into these machines if there is no economic incentive to create it. I know Google is out there saying this is just more search. Search is getting bigger. And then every single publisher is like, give me a break. Our search traffic is going down. You see it with the AI overviews, no matter what Google says. I feel like Silicon Valley has been trying this for a generation. They've been pissing on people's legs and telling them that it's raining. And it just doesn't fly as much anymore because they've been pissing on people's legs for a generation. Anyway, Alex, take it from here as far as what the big implications of this will be, particularly for our friends, the publishers.
I think we need to focus because this week's been a lot, right? There's been a lot announced, and the AI news is kind of flooding the zone. I mean, the OpenAI announcement, the Microsoft stuff, the Google stuff. Some would say that a lot of stuff that actually is more important and likely more societally earth-shattering is not what happens to people who make websites. But for the focus of this show, I think we should focus on that. Because
we can do both. We can do the societal implications.
I just think just to cast that aside for a second, because there are lots of people are going to talk about it. We're witnessing an acceleration in this technology where, it was hard to make it look good that Will Smith could eat spaghetti, and now they have fully voiced acting, singing characters that can be recorded in video. We're looking at, these agents that will do all these tasks for you. So there's millions of things, and I think it's kind of a rabbit hole to get into, but it is profound, the changes happening in computing, and we should all just look at what's happening. because it'll change all our lives and the way we work, etc. But let's hone in and focus on the web and people making money off websites. I think what's definitely happening is that anything that is content, and it used to be, we saw it with text, right? Like text was the easiest thing in the early days for Google to use and kind of project onto its search results before you had to click a link, whether it was, the contentious thing that they had with Yelp, showing basic reviews or showing the weather. There's this whole kind of surface layer of content that has been chipped away at, and that's completely gone. Which is why we talked last week about CNN launching a weather app that seems like misplaced resources. But what we're seeing now is that like also video, audio content can be done with that. And then the last bastion, which I talked about a lot, which was utility, like the ability to do things, right? So the utility of like a website was that it would show you an article, and that is gone. I don't need your website to give me that utility. I can ask an AI to just give me the gist. And if anything, the thing that AI gives back to me is better than the article with a clickbait title and 1,500 words before I get to the point. So I think that's a terrible place to be at right now. But I do still feel like utility is going to be a defensive maneuver, right? Like I can see that a website that provides a very specific type of utility that requires a specific type of visualization or set of controls will provide some value that people will be willing to pay for. Now, a lot of these will probably be absorbed by the LLMs. Like I can't see how even just like financial data visualization, mapping, all this type of stuff, which you could kind of safely say was like, well, people will come to my website to see that. People will come to my website to see, the grid of flights, so I can compare all these different flights, right? Which is why we used to use something like Kayak. Like interface used to be something you could sell. And even that's kind of going away. So
yeah, I want to just add to that with a real world example, just quickly. So I'm on the board of a company that's in the sports space. We were having a conversation with the product and development team yesterday. The whole idea of what essentially they trade in news about sports around the world, soccer in particular, and all the data that goes along with that on players, games, leagues, et cetera. So if you imagine, essentially one web page for you that is high in sort of its utility quotient, you would come there and it wouldn't look anything like the web pages that we create today, which are a bunch of boxes that have, the lead story and secondary story and all of that. You would immediately look for a small piece of data that would allow you to spit out that you're a Man U fan, and it would update you instantly as, like a pre-formatted query effectively on ChatGPT, right? And it would give you that news. And then below it, you would have, the games that were happening tomorrow, today, whatever, and you could interact with it. You could look at, the data in different ways. You could place a bet. You might have interactivity that tells you where to watch it or how to watch it and all that stuff. And essentially the future of their, of sort of sprawling set of pages and sections is really one page for you. And that page has to be highly functional and highly interactive. But as you point out, why? I mean, in the long run, maybe you don't even need that, because I could go back and forth in a chat interface and get most of that information and get it visualized in all the things that I want to do.
Right. And there were all these pieces of the interface that provided huge value, right? Like now, I mean, it seems nearly ridiculous now that we would try to make any money putting text on a page, but then you look at the more complex ones like notifications, right? So yes, but I like my sports app because I can set it to give me notifications when my team scores. Well, why can't I ask the AI that? And why can't I ask the AI to also merge that notification and contextualize it for me? Like all of that stuff is up for grabs. So that surface area where there was, like the kind of like the, we're all middlemen, right? We're all middlemen between the thing that people want, and the people. And we would build interfaces. I mean, even back in the print days, like a magazine was an interface for content delivery, right? Then we made them we built them online, and then we built all these complex features in it. And like, well, we built this nice search into the site and a way to categorize all your articles. But as it turns out, machines can now do a lot of that incredibly well. And it's only getting the modality of it is only expanding. I would say I feel pretty good being in gaming, because gaming feels like something that can't be completely abstracted by AI. And I do think that's where I would try to find a space. And there's going to be two spaces for media companies to exist in. One, which is you provide your information to AI, or you build a collection of individuals that are compelling enough that you want to interface with them directly, right? I think YouTube is doing great because of that. And I think if your personality is what you're selling, that remains safe. We've kept talking about that. The other one is can you build an interface which is so compelling to use outside of AI that people will still use it? And I think the easy one is social, right? The easy one is you're talking about sports. I think Fantasy Sports League, which is kind of gaming adjacent, is something that you'll likely do, with your friends on some sort of site that has specific visualizations. I think that there are probably a few things like that you can kind of pull out and say, can we build a product, a site that is so focused around that interaction that, people will come there and we can still do it better than anyone else. And yet there's community is part of that, social is part of that. And then maybe there's room for very custom experiences where the open web becomes just a collection of either data sets that you never interface with as a user, and very specific functionality and features that the chatbot or the AI cannot replicate in a way that is satisfactory. So that's the thing where I would try to find that space. And it's kind of a long-winded way of saying find that space. I don't know what the folks at Dotdash Meredith are saying today. Is it okay? Is everything okay? Is everything going to be fine? Am I still going to tolerate a pop-up window asking me to subscribe to their newsletter before I click a cookie appreciation setting and then watch a video?
Serious Eats was part of the Microsoft demo.
Yeah, but that kind of points to what the tension Alex was talking about in how utility and attention shift between the page and the aggregator. It's like the NL Web thing from Microsoft is about creating more utility at the web page level where you can interface with that data set on the page in real language. But why? Why would I do that?
Well, that's what I was like, why do I go to Serious Eats to do that? I mean, basically, the example was instead of going to Serious Eats and having, just going to the recipe, say, hey, I want some sort of crunchy topping and I've got chicken and I don't like this. And I think a lot of this, that's why I'm saying that I understand why they're marketing this way, but it's going to inevitably be centralized on the consumer level. It seems pretty clear that this is a completely different construct than visiting a bunch of websites to accomplish a task, in that I can just tell an agent to go and accomplish these tasks. That means there is no visiting websites. That means there's no page view. That means there's no ad impression, et cetera. They can't get around that.
I know.
I get that from the user perspective. That sounds very attractive.
It does, but I think that advertising is going to be an interesting thing to solve either way. But we're also at a time where we kind of don't know. I think we have a little bit of a fog of war as to the what people are going to come up with. I think it's hard for us to tell how this thing is going to play out. Maybe we're in that space where we kind of knew e-commerce was coming, but the best people could come up with was we're going to walk around in a 3D store and pick up objects that we put into a virtual shopping cart. Because in the beginning, we didn't know that we would have a list of products and we would.
We're almost there, Alex. We're going to get back. We're going to get back to that.
Well, what I'm trying to say is there are products out there that could be massive, multi-billion-dollar products that could be built with these tools like NL Web that we just cannot imagine today, and that will make going to the website, going to the URL, downloading the app worth it. Right? We're only looking at we're categorizing right now the things that we see in front of us today, and we're saying, yeah, all these things are fucked. And that's potentially true, but I can see that you could have a very specific data set and you force people to come to your website because that's the only place to access it. And not only that, it's actually more compelling to access it through this customized NL web-based chatbot that has these custom interfaces than it will ever be through, the chatbot that's built into your phone or whatever. We don't know. And I think this is where it's both very scary and also very, very, very exciting.
Okay, let's put a pin in it then, as they say. Let's talk about the new Buddy movie that's rolling out over in Silicon Valley. And that's Sam and Jony. OpenAI has purchased Jony Ive's, what is it called again? Not Love From. That wasn't acquired. It was IO. For $6.5 billion. It was around for what, like 18 months? That sounds fair. Good
Yeah,
work.
so it looks like there was some sort of spun-off project that was built out to build some sort of AI.
This is a spin-out project for $6.5 billion. They have no product, as we know.
It's $120 million per employee.
This is good. This is great. I started my newsletter.
It's funny money, right?
2 years before this.
It's stock, right? So it's
yeah,
kind of conceptual.
Something like 55 employees. That's quite a purchase price. They also rolled it out with, there's no product exactly, but apparently one is coming. And I think this is sort of symbolic in some ways. Jony Ive was, of course, well known for his partnership with Steve Jobs. And everyone, it seems like in Silicon Valley, is constantly trying to recreate the magic of Steve Jobs. And so now, I guess, Sam Altman is our new Steve Jobs in this, maybe? I don't know. Alex, what does all of this mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think the comparisons to Steve Jobs would probably not have had a video where he didn't show a product and just talked about the future, saying it was a done deal. I do find this stuff a little distracting. We don't know what they're building. It could be incredible, but it seems pretty navel-gazy and pretty, I don't know. There's once again, I think part of the big challenge I have with AI tools is that we have access to all these incredible things right now. And so much effort is spent talking about the potential future of this thing that's coming. And we had the rabbit and we had the pin and I get that, everybody's upset with the phone and wants to find something or feels guilty about, being part of the invention of the mobile phone and feels like, there's this interface shift coming and here's the opportunity and Apple's feeling weak right now. But it means nothing to me just seeing two people talk about how great they are and how great the future is looking. Even if they might be. I think Jony Ive is a genius. The team he's built around him are some of the best designers in the world. They understand consumer products. Altman is obviously an interesting and smart guy, and OpenAI is like an incredible company. But like all that stuff is hot air, and I think it would have been so much more powerful to say, hey, there's something happening, and give us 6 months and we'll drop the product. Like I don't know why in an age where we have fucking miracles happening and announced, like in computing, everybody's so obsessed with this potential like prototyping visions of the future that we may never reach. And we're talking about a device that will completely change the paradigm of how we work with computers, as if having a little screen wasn't important to our lives. I think the phone is here to stay for a long time. It's a great form factor. Or the fact that we're going to have this generalized intelligence when, holy shit, look at what we can do today. And all of this stuff is so underutilized. We're living in this kind of odd space right now where, as consumers, we don't have products that take advantage of the things that we have access to today. And we have a bunch of people promising us a future that is potentially completely made up. So it could be a great product. It could not be. I don't care.
And we have no idea what this product is or when it's going to be released or what it looks like.
Look, I'm so curious.
I'm getting Segway flashbacks.
When you think about it, the Segway was a great product.
They PR'd it that it was going to change. We were going to have to redesign cities.
Once again, that has always been the thing. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs came on and pulls out a little thing out of his pocket and say, hey, I have 10,000 songs or whatever the fuck in here, right? Like that's the thing that changes the world.
I can't get over the photo. The photo
I knew
killed
you'd
me.
have thoughts about this.
Okay, the photo.
The head on the shoulder. If someone paid $6.5 billion to my company, I would put my head on his shoulder.
The second thing is the flashbacks I'm getting when Jony Ive talks, I'm feeling, early aughts Apple, or like, because he narrated so much of their stuff.
He's really nice to listen to. He's got a lovely voice.
He does have a nice voice. It's sort of a kind of techno-poetic drawl, this English thing that he does. It's great. But it's nice to see someone who's about to experience a renaissance in their late 50s as a product creator. So I can sympathize, or I find that promising.
You're having your own renaissance, Troy.
Right, exactly.
The Renaissance of Troy.
Yes, it's amazing to me that the way that Sam Altman has orchestrated these kind of structural moves around fundraising, around kind of socializing a very important technology globally, and then managing to kind of pull in someone like Jony Ives into this. So kudos to him. And at the same time, a move that, certainly what ChatGPT has done is completely change the tempo at Google. Like we're seeing that, we saw that in I/O, right? Like they are on high alert and they are starting to push out products, at a pace we've never seen before. But this one is threatening not just to Google, it's threatening to Apple, because owning AI interface begs for hardware. The whole, obviously the promise of acquiring I/O is to build a new kind of device, and maybe it'll sit on your face. Maybe it's a new kind of phone. But like when you think about how you use your phone, it's like, I know, Alex, you're really bullish on the form factor, but like, why do we need 100 apps on our cell phone? We don't need it anymore.
No, absolutely.
Nobody wants to use their phone more. It's as simple as that for me. Nobody wants to use their phone more. Nobody gets to the end of the day is like, I wish I had looked at my phone more.
I mean, I think that this device is going to be really difficult, because like a form factor like the glasses can be kind of magical, but there are so many technological limitations, the largest being battery. It's like you got to charge it every 3 hours.
I know, but let's say the thing is, we should always look at let's not get hung up by, the science behind it, because I think, like, let's say we need a few minor miracles for these glasses to be light enough so that you can wear them, etc. I think, we see minor miracles happening all the time. So let's say the glasses do exist, right? I still think that having a little sheet on your phone that you can doodle on and draw on and tap and point at and show to someone, that stuff's not going away, right? So I think what we're going to see with the development of that is a collection of devices, right? Some of them you wear on your face, which is going to be interesting. Some of them, they might be in your pocket and listening to you at all times. Some of them might be in your back pocket. Some of the phone you might even leave at home, because it's you don't really need it around you all the time. And people do that already with the watch and AirPods. You're fine without your phone. The thing that I think is more pertinent is, yes, like the usage case, like having 100 apps on your phone, paying for all these apps, or downloading, maintaining, updating them. All of that stuff is where Apple's risk is. I don't think it's actually in hardware so much, because I think they can build it. I think they've shown that they can build it. I think they've shown that they can, I think if somebody comes up with technology that allows them to build super light glasses, Apple will be a year behind, and people will wait a year for Apple's version of it, right? But the software interface and the way we interact with computer is just going to become much more diverse. I think we can't get into a mindset where everything's just going to be replaced. But if you look at your phone, there's a good 50-60% of things that you can say, like, yep, I could do that just by talking to my machine, right? And unfortunately for media people, a lot of that is consuming media, right? Yeah. So,
well, on a more superficial note, I found that the kind of, it's almost like this kind of fake San Francisco casualness of, hey, we're just meeting up in a cafe. Meanwhile, there's probably 50 people on the crew. They've cleaned the homeless off the streets, and there's
they had a drone.
The packaging of it was amazing to me. I mean,
I won't let you berate San Francisco like that. It's got its issues like every other city. There's
I love San Francisco, but walk
around. There's plenty of places where you can walk around without any of that stuff. But yes, I think there's an artifice to these types of videos that feels a little bit
But I don't know, maybe this is like a pivot back to a little bit more of packaging. Like I always think pendulums swing back and forth. I go back and forth with Troy Sarchan and maybe Ben Smith a little bit on this, where he thinks that there's a pivot back to professionalism, that we've reached the end of this period of the sort of rough and ready, and we're, ready to put on business casual. And maybe this is a more package. It doesn't scream authentic. I think it's a little bit different than, the kinds of things that, say, Zuckerberg has been doing with Meta. But who knows? Maybe why not?
It screams Botox to me. But I think Jony Ive looks good as a 58-year-old, and I would, hope to look so good. But when that date hits in my life, which is a long way off.
Yeah, at least 15, 20 years.
Where was I going with this? Brian, your thing about the Ben Smith, return to gatekeepers, packaged media, maybe that's what we want. I don't think it ever, I think that the kind of creator energy doesn't go anywhere. I think in many ways, there's an army of people making content, and they're only getting more and more sophisticated. And that is evident every day if you look at YouTube. The preferred medium is video. Creators are getting more and more sophisticated in how they tell stories and package.
And it's getting way easier. It's getting way easier to do it.
I totally agree.
A lot
with
of
Alex
the craft is like the editing, even the writing of the script, the color correction. This entire podcast is going to be run through an AI to do all sorts of things, to manage the way our voices sound, to cut out noise, and all of that stuff's getting easier. So yes, there's a professionalism coming back, but it is not by the professional class. If anything, there's a deprofessionalization of the entire entertainment and media industry.
Right, and I will confess that the scaled players, particularly in news, that do original reporting, that package kind of like reporting at scale, are doing fine. Right? Particularly the big news brands from print, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, etc. And, maybe you can put Semaphore in that group, because I think that in that category, we long for consistency and trust and credibility and packaging. That means that they're still relevant for lots of people that seek out that kind of news. For lots of people that don't, it's completely irrelevant. But, I personally know that the first thing I do every morning is I go to, established legacy media brands to get news. And I don't think that's changing. One thing that struck me, Brian, and I just wanted to make this connection quickly, was one of the things that media brands do, other than, packaging content, in a certain way with a certain level of professionalism, is they're gatekeepers, not just for people that want to, for all types of people that want to reach their audience, including advertisers, because they're expensive, right? You need to pay up to be inside of the New York Times. And what's happening is without gatekeepers, lunatics like the people that sent me 20 emails this week go direct, without people. Right. So just some context there. One of the interesting things, what happened last week is illustrative of a need that will never go away, which is the need to market your services irrespective of the type of company you are. And we published an episode last week on Substack, a podcast episode, and sent out an email. Somebody was able to take that email address, mine, right, and use that, process our transcripts from our podcast, and start pitching different people to be on this pod. And they were all created with AI. I got at least 30 emails from people.
I got several.
That took our transcripts, basically said, here's why, this person is interesting to you because of what you said on your podcast. And oh, by the way, I love your podcast. And you should have them on.
And here's the 3 things you said about this thing that is relevant.
Precisely. Yeah. And they were all
it's such a bad look for the person being like pitched, though, isn't it? I don't even know if the people being pitched are real. At one point, a new like AI bot seemed to be pitching another AI bot. But maybe they're not AI bots.
I'm just saying that promotion unconstrained into your email box via, accelerated and scaled with AI is a nasty thing. It just creates junk.
I mean, it's
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how PR changes with a lot of this. I mean, it could be, I think everyone is trying to figure out what the successor to SEO is, and that's to get into the chatbot answers, and everything is gamed on the internet. Everything. This will be no different. And there's some indications that the best way to get to worm your way in there, because everyone's going to be marketing their wares, like you said, is actually through, guess what? Trusted journalistic outlets, journals, trade publications. This could be the time for my pay-per-pitch idea, where you tax the PR industry and, they have to pay a tax every time they pitch one of these outlets.
It just highlights the fact that a gatekeeper not only plays a role in ensuring that you're getting quality media, but actually in some ways ensuring that you're getting quality outreach.
You're implying that the gatekeeper itself can't be automated. You're talking about an issue right now, for example, this specific issue with your email. A much smarter inbox would make you never have seen that. Your AI would just say, hey, there's this dude that just sent us 30 things. I just decided to trash them. And I think that I'm finding, and look, like I always say, I'm an early adopter, which means I adopt things and behaviors earlier that might never be adopted, but I think a lot of them do. I use AI a lot to verify and validate information. Now, I know that it can imagine things and stuff like that, but I found myself surprised that I would go and say, hey, find me the best high-end, hotel that has this specific design language and da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't go to a reputable source for that. I asked the AI, and then I added my own layer of, of kind of editing on top of it. But I think over time, even the sources become potentially at risk, right? Because I do that less. I have a New York Times subscription. I never go there. I just don't do it anymore. I just say, hey, give me a rundown of the news of what's going on right now. And here's the topics I follow. And so I think source is going to be really important. I just wonder how much people care. I think people don't want to be flooded with junk, but I think that junk is going to also be easily cut out by the same.
Yeah, and I think that maybe what people don't appreciate as much, as a nod to the gatekeeper point, is that really what this change represented is an ushering in of new gatekeepers. So, Pivot was a little podcast. Now it's an enormous business, and it's just a new media brand. All In has become the official media arm of the Trump government. And, as such, become established media in their own way, where it was just, 4 dudes before. So, really it is a kind of generational, shift in the players, but still, attention aggregates always.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you saw it. Bernie Sanders went on Andrew Schultz's Flagrant podcast. So the Democrats are going back to, they're saying, hey, we're going to go into these environments and we're going to hold our own. Bernie's a different type of character. So he did a nice job on there. He's an avuncular, kind of sometimes a little grouchy older guy. And I don't know, the Democrats also, they had an entire meeting. I don't even know if they're going to be able to master this. I mean, they're in a world of hurt right now. They're continuing to try to figure out their Joe Rogan strategy and looking to get what was really, I don't think we've now gone beyond cringe here, where they're starting to talk about return on culture, and they hosted an ideathon. I don't know if that's going to do it.
I mean, this is all such a waste of time for them. The first time they thought it was social media, so they all focused on social media elected Trump, so let's all go on that. Now it's podcast elected Trump. So okay, the solution we need is to have our own podcast and solve our own podcast. It's like they have the Microsoft problem where they see Apple being successful with something, so they try to do it and they do it too late and worse. It seems to me that the issue that they have is just a broad communication message. By the time they figure out podcasts, there'll be something new. And it's kind of sad to watch them just flail like that. They're so terrible at this. What's your good product, Troy?
I didn't see anything remarkable this week.
You didn't see anything remarkable this week?
No. I mean, yeah, that's funny that I said that. I mean, what do you want me to say, Alex? That Gemini is a good product, which it is, by the way.
I'm going to say that AI mode is a good product.
Well, the AI mode's a good product. Gemini is really fast. If I was going to pick a good product this week, it would probably be VO3. VO3
Yeah, right.
is Google's new video creation AI. And importantly, now you can add voice to it. Have you seen some of the videos where people are talking? AI people are talking?
It's all happening.
That one video that guy made, Alex, that's the one that said, "We can talk."
It's
Yeah.
exciting that it means another Google subscription.
Here we go.
I mean, look, here's the thing. None of these products actually should be more exciting for people building products with AI. Google's key market is going to be the cloud stuff where they will be able to sell these things. And then it's search, right? That's what's going to make their whole money. Actually, a lot of their consumer side of the products, including the VO stuff and the tools for it, are not particularly good. And it shows maybe like a lack of interest in Google in turning these things like VO into consumer products, but rather, as like ways to kind of amplify their core businesses, which are going to be cloud. So this stuff as a service, or search, which is like ads and generating stuff like that. But let's look at this ad. And these are all, just for the audio listeners, you should watch it. These are all generated with video and audio.
We can talk.
No more silence.
Yes, we can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk with accents.
Oh, I think that would be marvelous.
Yes, it is very fun. But
Yes, it is very good.
It's very fun.
I can talk.
Yes.
We can talk.
Yes.
Yeah, we can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk.
Yes.
We can talk. No.
We can talk as cartoons. This is amazing.
Imagine all the narrative possibilities.
Let's talk.
So what are we going to talk about now? What are we going to talk about now that we can talk?
I have no idea. What do you want to talk about?
So if anybody complains about the fact that maybe sometimes their eyebrows look weird, like, just relax, man. Like, things are going to get better, even better. This is insane. And I think we're kind of become so numb to it at this stage. But like, this is a full scale invasion of the creative industry. And I cannot comprehend what this means in the long term, but it definitely means something. Hey, AB, anonymous banker joined us.
AB, thank you for joining us. I think one of the big questions I end up having is, all distribution is fraught right now. And obviously we talked a lot about search already on this episode. We don't need to recover that ground. But it seems pretty clear that for a lot in media, the distribution is going to end up going in the paid direction. There'll be a toll, there'll be a tax. I noticed, like, even when Sundar Pichai was like posting about the All In episode he was doing that like LinkedIn first comment strategy where you put the link in the first comment. I was like, my God, how humiliating. Like, everyone has to do this stuff. And it seems like it's pretty clear. I mean, look, this marketers always know, like, if you want reliable distribution, you just pay for it. And yeah, it's going to be a big cost, a new cost to the business, but seems like that's the direction things are going. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, the media companies who have a built-in audience can keep people there and aren't worrying where to get traffic. But for most of them, I think it's going to continue to get tougher to get new people to come to their platforms. In the general consumer marketplaces around travel, you saw this week Airbnb talking about new offerings that they want to bring to their marketplace. And I think it's interesting when you look at, so there's basically three large publicly traded companies in this space: Bookings.com, Expedia, and Airbnb. And they have all figured out ways to elongate their monetization of a consumer around travel. Airbnb has added experiences on a few years ago, but I think they realize that they're not going to add more inventory or get necessarily significantly more booking volume, but they want to grab more of the wallet share that people use when they go out to travel, right? So in 2024, there was 500 experiences and nights booked on the platform. And I don't think that number is going to go up that much, but where they see value is adding another $20 or $30 of revenue on that should effectively become contribution to help boost revenue. And just that little amount of additional revenue could actually grow the entire business's revenue like 20 or 30%. So when you look at some of these different consumer marketplaces, I think they're even getting smarter about, okay, instead of paying to acquire these users, the users that they have on the platforms, they want to make them more valuable.
Troy, any thoughts?
I mean, same as it ever was, right? I mean, listen, Google doesn't owe anybody anything, right? Like, I mean, when people whinge about losing SEO position on Google, I mean, it's a drag, I get it, but they have no responsibility to drive traffic to your property. They're just a website. They can do whatever they want. They're a business. They'll make decisions, etc. And so, yeah, we're leaving a time when we expected, in digital media distribution to be, free. And it's not going to be anymore. And I'm not quite sure what you're saying, AB, about the Airbnb thing, about getting, using, I guess, your distribution, get a larger share of wallet. I mean, it makes sense, right? But that's like every business. Every business does that.
But I think what's noteworthy about that is like they end up becoming advertisers. Like when you look at like how fast Uber's advertising is growing, it's growing like 60% a year, and it's like $1 billion business, right? Because their advertising is they're just selling distribution. And I think for a lot of publishers, that's a big challenge in that when you look at where the platforms are going, they're just going to be just selling straight distribution, and like advertising kind of fades away a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's maybe the harsh truth of the modern condition, which is that actually we spend far more time in transactional interfaces like Uber and like DoorDash and like Amazon, and those places also have more data, and those places are better places for performance advertising, period.
I was also interested, I want to get your take, AB. Did you see the Wall Street Journal article about the stealthy wealthy? I mean, this has been like a regular sort of meme in X for the last couple of years, but the way you get rich is by boring businesses. And, there's a lot of like, the sweaty startup guy. There's a whole bunch of like the course type people.
The HVAC guy, there's a bunch of these people.
This is just the same as it ever was. The rich guys in my town own car dealerships and apartment blocks and restaurants and, agricultural supply businesses. It's the same as it ever was.
Let's circle back really quick to the marketplaces, because I think there's actually something interesting. Because Troy said, what was your point? So the point I'm making is the original idea behind some of these internet marketplaces is we'll basically transfer this intent to a pool of people that we brought. So in that example of Airbnb, all these people that are selling or renting their rooms out, the amount that you have to pay to acquire those customers to come to your site and then all the other fees and people that you need to service that is actually not that profitable. And in certain instances, the value has been completely lost. So things like job boards, all of the income, like the profit that these places are making are selling that data and offering these consumers other offers. And so it's pretty interesting to see you're having to pay so much more for the consumer that the only way that you could make money is attaching a bunch of other things on the, whatever you want to call it, the unsexy businesses. I think where these people became even more wealthy was when all the extra money came in during the different COVID cash infusions, because you see like houses in the Florida Panhandle now going for like $20 or $30 million. And so you've seen these guys that own the car dealerships. You're smirking, right? But it's crazy. You have houses.
I know. I just didn't think the Panhandle was going to $20 million. But
yeah, I mean, the real estate in some places in Florida that none of us would ever want to live is just as expensive as Malibu. I think, in that article, it talks about the guy who has the carpet business for elementary schools. Like that business will never go away with AI, unless they start using tile floors instead of carpet for these things. But in the media world, there are people making that much money in sort of unsexy ways, but it's usually around ARB, and they don't always have such stable businesses, but these people can always figure out new sort of ARB opportunities where they're able to create large, profitable businesses with not that many people. It does exist in digital media.
How is all the lead gen businesses going to fare with all of these changes? Let us move on to the next hustle.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is whenever if they're not just like handing off the lead and they're actually providing some way to basically validate or perfect the intent, I think they have sticking power because it doesn't make sense for an OpenAI or Google to get into that game. And the companies that come to Google to advertise, I don't think will ever get sophisticated enough with their data to buy correctly. But if you're just pushing people off from your AI rate and review to an Amazon product page, I don't know how long those businesses stick around. But if you're actually helping people navigate which pest control company to sign up for or which home loan, I think those have staying power.
This is Brian, this is what we talk about. This is the unseen kind of transformative layer that exists on the internet that no one really, other than people that are in the business, understand. And it's that a law firm, for example, spends $5 a click on Google and is tremendously inefficient with that spend. And so over the years, many middle players have emerged that actually transform the intent from Google into something that is valuable for a law firm or a health company or a bank, or, there's innumerable places where that layer has created value. And one could easily ask themselves, why didn't Google just take all of that value? Because they could build funnels around all of this stuff, but they haven't, because there's a lot of noise and complexity with dealing with fragmented markets, like a med spa, a law firm, any number of financial companies. And so, I think that those companies will go on. I mean, I think that AI can sort of extend the talons of the aggregator deeper into the, value creation layer. But I said to AB's point, I think that as long as you are something more than a link provider as an affiliate company, as long as you are transforming that transaction in some shape or form and adding value to it, I think that will exist for a long time. But I do think what is, I think, really relevant for publishers is that the business that became really important to them, which is just product affiliate leading people to buy a vacuum cleaner on Amazon, is going to get tough. It's not going to go away. It's just going to shrink or not grow.
The final thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was understanding risk profile in a time like this, because I think it can be paralyzing. I mean, I get that feeling when I talk to a lot of publishers, in that there's so many unknowns that people make the worst choice, which is to not make a choice. And I think that's what I was asking Alex about, like, what do you build now, is because it seems like the risks are in some ways a lot higher now when you're trying to understand. It's very unclear where things will land and where you should bet. So I don't really have like something very formed around this, but like, hey, B, you deal with risk all the time. How would you advise people to think about risk? Because we have the like risk fetishists that like to, say everyone should just be like a riverboat gambler. And usually those people already are rich, and so they can take on that kind of risk. But for most people, they're not going to take on that kind of risk.
Yeah. I mean, I think the publishers have gotten burned so many times when the internet companies were getting big, like Facebook would offer publishers some sort of video thing where they said, hey, we're going to guarantee revenue for the first 6 months or a year. People would build up a team to produce videos just for Facebook, and either that program didn't have the audience efficacy or the advertising efficacy. So I think from a publisher's perspective, they've been like risk off for a really long time, not just in the current world of AI disrupting their businesses. I think they've learned to not chase new potential areas of consumer engagement and sort of sit back and wait to see where the market evolves. I mean, you've seen a bunch of these publishers starting to turn on Substacks, but that doesn't really cost any money because it's just basically pushing out content in a new channel. But I think for them, a lot of it is that unless they can see revenue within a year or not even that, within a couple months, they can't really lean in and commit the capital and the teams to build out things or invest in new tooling or whatever with the hope that it will help increase their business. So I think from the general media segment, I think they have a really hard time being innovative. And then more broadly, as you think about sort of capital allocators and investors, depending on who it is, if it's a VC, they're getting paid to take a lot of risk. And depending on who gives them capital and what their focus is, to us, it may seem like they're making stupid bets, but that's why someone gave them money, is to invest in a certain segment. And hopefully that person giving that VC or PE person money has allocated capital in other ways. So their risk is sort of offset by a much broader portfolio of investments. So I think from a business operator perspective, though, most of these media companies just can't take risk.
Hey, Brian, I would add a dimension to it. When you're managing a media P&L, you're basically looking at 3 or 4 cost buckets. One is how much you spend on content. The other is how much you spend product and tech, essentially your own platforms. The third is sales and marketing. And the final one is kind of overhead operations, all that kind of stuff, right? Like that enables the whole thing to function. I think what you end up seeing, and maybe a lot of us, myself included, got this really wrong, was investing in your own platforms, i.e. CMSs and all that stuff, was kind of futile if you look at it over a long arc. And what you're going to probably do is, unless there's a very clear idea around how you create utility with technology, you minimize your spend on product and tech because you just use other people's platforms, be it Substack or whatever. You increasingly are going to be way more judicious in how you chase down sales in Madison Avenue, like how you sell advertising. And you're going to look to, partner with people, do programmatic stuff where monetization comes at a lower cost. And you're going to really try to invest in talent and product and content. Not product, talent and content. And I just think there you can see, over a shorter duration, a return on that investment. But it's right now, I think it's like you batten up the hatches and you figure out where your marginal dollar is going to make, the most difference. And that's probably, in trying to find out what kind of like video or audio investment is going to make sense to you.
Yeah, I was really interested to see the Vox Media deal with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. It's a different kind of deal. It's a talent deal. These kind of publishers, I don't think that's very typical, where Kara and Scott will be taking 70% of what they sell. Totally a different kind of deal. And I've expected publishers to be doing more of these kinds of things. I think it's a great sort of in between, where they don't want to run sort of their own company, clearly, and Vox has all the infrastructure. They can distribute it, they can do the monetization and the marketing. And so I think those kind of deals make a lot of sense. Do you?
Well, 30% is a pretty standard cost of sale, right? And at the level that they are at in terms of annual revenue, whether it's somewhere between 15 and 20 million, 25 million maybe, the cost of producing it is a rounding error. Like, let's say you had, $1 million production cost a year. I don't think it would be significantly more than that. And so a deal where you're basically taking 30 cents of the dollar to sell the product. And I'm sure that if, Vox fumbles there's some kind of out if they can't deliver the revenue. But, podcast ads are, I don't think that they're easy to sell, but if you have a big audience, they're these days they're pretty straightforward to monetize. So, seems like a reasonable deal.
Yeah, I think what probably happened there is they shopped it. They couldn't get a minimum guarantee from anybody else that they like at a level where they thought, even if their audience went down a bit, they would still make more money doing this share. There's a part of that article where it says Vox still owes them a good amount of money, like $15 million. And so, yeah. And then they're like a reference to, we're dividing up these payments to be most tax efficient. But the way that I read into it is like, even though their audience is pretty large, it's still like this kind of B2B-ish or like industry focused. And I don't think they probably found Spotify or Sirius interested in their product and were willing to pay them for it. So this was like the way for them to make the most money. They know the partner. And even if, like I said, the audience goes down a bit, the revenue goes down a bit, this is the way to make the most money.
That's it for this episode of People versus Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
All right. Cool.
Thanks for stopping by, AB.
All right, see you guys. See you.